Thanks very much, Sharon. Well, joining me now on PM Agenda, as they do at this time every week, and in fact for the last time for 2013, is Grahame Morris here in the Canberra studio with me, and Bruce Hawker joins us as well. Thank you both very much for your time. I want to start with our top story today. It is the Royal Commission into the home insulation scheme, and Grahame Morris, clearly there are lessons to be learned here. Is it really necessary that Kevin Rudd and Peter Garrett appear, do you think?
Well, they were the instigators, so they should. But I think, look, what everyone is hoping here is that this doesn't go on and on and on, that the Royal Commissioner makes some sensible findings so that some of these accidents and whatnot don't happen again, and that some of the small businesses and whatnot can all go back to work insulating homes, which we sort of need in this country. But I think there might also be something else, although it's hard for a Royal Commissioner, and that is the importance of, if a government is shoveling money out, that it's got to be very, very careful of the process and make sure that your money and my money is being spent properly and that it's not being wasted. But I suspect he can't go down that path, but at least he ought to have a look at the safety angle, seek what can be done to improve this industry, and hope that the government acts, get out of the way, and small business get on with their job again.
Bruce Hawker, you of course are very close to Kevin Rudd. Do you think it would be justifiable for him to appear before the Royal Commission? Obviously, if he's summoned, there's not much that he can say about it.
Well, I guess that's a matter for the Commissioner, David. I don't think there's going to be much revealed in this inquiry that hasn't already been aired in the 8 separate inquiries, reviews and audits that have taken place into these tragic deaths since 2010. So I think that's the most likely outcome of all this, that it's not likely to reveal anything that hasn't already been revealed in any of those inquiries.
It was a promise of Tony Abbott's. Are you suggesting it's in some way political?
Well, it's one promise he's certainly going to keep. I think he ran it pretty hard during the election campaign. It was aimed very much against Kevin Rudd then, and it was an attempt in the election campaign to revive that issue, which was a bad one for Kevin Rudd and for the government from 2009, 2010. But it wasn't one which I think the public felt really required the sort of airing that it received in the election campaign. I remember during the campaign when it came out, the response from public, from the media, was pretty lukewarm to it. It was an area that had been well travelled before, and there was a sense, I think, amongst the commentariat that this was an attempt to politicise the events that had gone before.
Grahame Morris, any response to that? Is it political?
Well, yes, it was sort of announced in a political climate, but I think it is right that we actually have a look and see what went wrong properly, thoroughly, and we bring everyone in, we ask them what went wrong, but so that we can make sure it doesn't blink and will happen again.
Mm. Well, the government is looking at savings on a very different matter in all sorts of areas. And we just heard from the Social Services Minister, Kevin Andrews, in relation to the disability support payment. He says that it must be sustainable into the future. Now, this is the sort of language that we've heard in a whole range of areas. Bruce Hawker, does that mean, in your eyes, that it's being sized up for cuts?
It's got to be. Why would they be even talking about it if it weren't, David? I think this is very worrying news for the disability sector. I've got members of my own extended family who've suffered from significant disability and who are on pensions, who will feel concern about the prospect of these matters of permanency for disability pensions going out the window, which is what I think is being flagged by the minister. And of course, it raises more questions about the government's commitment to the National Disability Insurance Scheme. I saw your question of the Minister about the total spend on the NDIS, and he sidestepped it as he sidestepped that question every time it's been asked of him. They went into this election campaign saying that they had a bipartisan position with the Labor Party on the issue, and now we see them starting to prepare the groundwork for a backtrack on the NDIS and on other areas to do with disability. I think that's a very, very worrying development in our society, and I don't think it's one that the public are going to be particularly pleased about.
Grahame Morris, is this the right area to be looking at for the knife?
Well, look, two things. One is, if I was going to appoint anybody to look after the disability sector in this country, I'd pick Kevin Andrews. He's a very good man. Now, the second thing is, I think we have to be very, very careful that we don't have people in the current generation, parents with disabilities, not being greedy, but swallowing up a hell of a lot of the money, so that, you know, the next generation of young kids who have disabilities and the grandchildren and the ones who come after, that somehow or other, you know, we've swallowed up a lot of the money. I think we do have to be prudent here and make sure that this is a scheme that's going to go on and on and on, and not just make the current generation feel good.
Well, what about Labor's point, though, Grahame Morris, that at the time that they're introducing a generous paid parental leave scheme that'll pay, mothers, families on $150,000 a year or more, $75,000 to have a baby. Is that the right scheme to be introducing?
I don't know if there's going to be a cap on that or not. But, you know, when did working mothers become undeserving? You know, I just think this is outrageous. That working mums, somehow or other becomes a dirty word if working mums get some sort of a benefit. Well, blimey, you know, the government at the moment is trying to balance all of these things. It is not easy, and particularly coming after another mug Labor government which has left a debt for everybody.
Well, just on that point, David, this paid parental leave scheme, it is a promise by Tony Abbott. I think it was one that he had in 2010 and he brought over into 2013, opposed by virtually everybody in his own cabinet, I understand, but it was his captain's pick, or whatever he wanted to describe it as. This is a $22 billion scheme over 4 years. And what it means is that women on $150,000 a year are going to be paid $75,000 for 6 months to stay at home and mind their children. And that is inequitable, particularly when we're talking about the disability sector, people who are in terrible strife and require a lot of support to just survive, let alone enjoy life. It just goes to a whole raft of issues about this government and wrong priorities. $22 billion. Now that is a tax which is going to go on business, which they're going to pass on to the mums and dads and the supermarkets and wherever they buy the products that those big businesses produce. That is a big impost on everybody. If they were going to break one promise, that should be it.
Well, moving on, and Japanese whaling, as it does at this time every year, has reared its head, and indeed the government has come under some scrutiny for its decision to send a plane to monitor operations in the Southern Ocean. Over the last few years, when this has been Labor's problem, the shadow Environment Minister at the time, Greg Hunt, who's now the Environment Minister, was very critical of Labor for not sending a customs boat, a customs vessel, to monitor operations in the Southern Ocean, and promised that indeed in government they would send a boat. Indeed, just earlier this year, Greg Hunt had this to say. Take a look.
There should be a customs vessel. There should be representations in Tokyo. Anything less is a complete failure.
So anything less, Grahame Morris, than a customs vessel is a complete failure. What do you make of that?
That was then, this is now.
It's that easy, is it?
No, look, if you put your common sense hat on here, it just seemed to me that an aeroplane can cover a lot more territory than a blinking boat can. And if the aeroplane finds something, then, you know, out can go a boat, and we don't waste too much time. I do think that Greenpeace and whatnot have got to be very careful here. You know, right back to the days when Malcolm Fraser first decided that Australia would oppose whaling. You know, Australians have been saying, yeah, we agree. But lately, people have started to become a bit ambivalent. as Greenpeace and some of their bosses and whatnot start doing stupid things, and I think them whinging at the moment about whether or not a plane goes out first and then a boat, what's it matter? But there are a number of activities in recent times where Greenpeace, I think, has got to be very careful, because already some of the support that they have had, right from the top down to the mums and dads, is just waning a bit. They want to be careful.
But what's a plane going to... I mean, I thought part of the idea of having the boat down there was the presence of an Australian customs vessel in the Southern Ocean would sort of pressure Japan to do the right thing. A plane flying overhead's not going to do that, is it?
Look, a plane will take sort of half a morning. A boat will take a week to get there. It is just efficient to me. Go out, find the blinking Japanese boats, then send a boat out to intercept if needed.
Bruce Hawker, is this anything other than a broken promise? Regardless of what's a better policy, a plane or a boat, it was something that they promised, a boat.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if they thought a plane was a better idea back earlier in the year, then Hunt should have said so. He obviously didn't think that. He obviously doesn't think that now. It's another cost-saving exercise, I would expect. And this is another case of Treasury just calling the shots, or the Treasurer calling the shots on these issues. Look, Greenpeace and Bob Brown have made it quite clear that they think a plane is quite inadequate. And I think you just got to follow their interests on this one. They're there confronting the whalers on a daily, hourly basis. It's very treacherous, and they are treated very roughly quite often when they try to intercept the whalers as they kill these whales. So I think you just got to listen to what they're saying. If they say that it's much better to have a custom-built boat down there to to observe and intervene when necessary, then that's what we should be doing. And it should be, and frankly, it's just another example of the government breaking yet another promise. Not good.
OK, well, stay with us. After the break, we are going to stay with our panel. We're going to look ahead to 2014 and see exactly what are the pressure points for the two leaders, and indeed where the big issues will lie. Stay with us. You're watching PM Agenda. Still with me on our political panel this afternoon, Grahame Morris and Bruce Hawker. We want to throw forward to 2014, and perhaps to you first of all, Bruce Hawker, what do you see as the key issues for the Abbott government, and indeed the opposition as well? Where are the big political battles going to happen?
Look, I think obviously the economy is going to be a front and centre, and management of the budget and how they go about selling the big cuts which are going to come in the May budget is going to be a very important point for the government, and to some extent that could set the tone for the coming year. As I've said before, their problem is that they're a big spending government, so it's hard for them to keep blaming the Labor government for everything that's happened, and they'll certainly won't be able to do that well into the future. I think the other challenge for Tony Abbott will be, I think, the rise of the Dries, and where they're going to really start to make their influence felt in the government and on the government, particularly around the workforce, the workplace, occupational health and safety, those areas. There'll be some pressure on Abbott to continue down a path of deregulation, I think, and that will be an interesting tussle to see played out internally inside the Liberal Party. That's how I see it.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. And Grahame Morris, just before I ask you for your thoughts on that, just to respond to that, how does Tony Abbott manage those two matters that are very closely related? Firstly, the budget itself, and secondly, the Dries in his own party.
Well, I agree with Bruce in the sense that the budget is going to be important. The first Howard Costello budget was similar sort of condition where they had to cut. And this one will be no different. But strangely, the Howard Costello first budget was very well received. The people said, all right, well, you've got to sort things out a bit. We'll give you the benefit of the doubt. This one is hard, but it will set the tone. Then, of course, you've got Tasmanian election, South Australian election, probably the West Australian Senate election. You've got the Griffith by-election, and then later in the year you've got the Victorian election. all of those come into the federal sphere one way or another. The budget, we've got also, some really, really heavy inquiries reporting, financial services, the Audit Commission, industrial relations, there'll be tax a bit later, the whole of the Federation. All of these sort of things are going to be lumped on Tony Abbott's doorstep at some stage next year. We're also going to have a new Governor-General. But back on the big one, the budget I think is very, very important, and it's not easy, this one. As for wets, dries, anything else, Tony Abbott's the man. By so far, it's not funny, not going to matter.
And the budget, though, this budget coming up is the important one, really, isn't it?
Well, I think it is, because, the Australians are very good at giving new governments a fair go. And they know that this government has got to do something about the nation's credit card. Got to. Otherwise, we just won't be able to afford anything.
Does that include breaking promises?
Well, look, everyone tries not to break promises. If we never had a Labor government, you wouldn't have to break any promises because the economy would be chugging along. Yeah, look, I don't know what the hell it is. Whether it's Fraser coming in after Whitlam, Howard and Costello coming in after Keating, poor old Joe Hockey and Tony Abbott coming in after Gillard and Swan and Rudd. Maybe one day a Liberal government can come in and not have to clean up a Labor mess. That'd be fun.
Bruce Hawker, what are the strengths and weaknesses for Bill Shorten? I wanted to ask you about. What are the things that he has to keep check on when it comes to his performance next year?
Well, one of the things that he's got that's a big advantage is he was able to take his entire cabinet into government into opposition with him. No cabinet ministers lost their seat in the last election campaign. That was a big plus for Labor. They have an experienced team on the front bench there, and that I think is going to help Bill a lot as the coming year unfolds. People like Bowen, for example, Chris Bowen, very capable, and he will take the argument right up to Hockey and best him on more than one occasion, I suspect, when it comes to the question about budget and priorities and broken promises. Paid parental leave, as we've just discussed, $22 billion. They go around blaming the Labor government for that. That's not Labor's problem, that's their problem. That's something they've introduced, and it's a massive impost. So they're going to have to explain all that, and Labor's going to have to take the fight up to them. I think Bill Shorten has done a good job so far. He hasn't tried to overplay his hand. We are in opposition, we have to accept that. Let's get the internals right, get the staffing arrangements in place, make sure that the ministry, the shadow ministry, is well looked after by his office, and then go into 2014 ready to start challenging the Abbott government, because it hasn't had much of a honeymoon. It hasn't really had any honeymoon at all. So Shorten is in a good position to be able to start turning the heat up on them earlier than you would probably otherwise expect an opposition to be able to do after it's just come out of government.
Would Tony Abbott be worried of Bill Shorten, Graham?
Oh, look, Bill, the opposition leader's job's never easy, but he's got to continue taking it up to the government, yeah. He's got to be slightly careful. He's got to keep morale up. That is the hard thing for any opposition leader, as they say, oh, God, how long are we going to be in opposition? Keeping morale up, and he's got to make sure that nobody outshines him. But also, we're talking about 2014. A couple of the really big things next year is that throughout the year, we are going to have the world's most powerful treasurers and finance ministers here, and towards the end of the year, we're going to have the biggest array of world leaders that this country has ever seen. And it'd be interesting to see what that sort of does for the nation's psyche, what it does for the agenda, and what they come up with.
Okay, Bruce Hawker, Grahame Morris. Just one last comment, Bruce.
I was just going to say they'll probably be saying what a remarkable Labor government it was that kept debt down so low, that kept unemployment low and kept people in work, and with a very sensible stimulus measure. But I suspect they won't be saying that out loud.
Bruce Hawker, Grahame Morris, thanks for your thoughts this afternoon. Indeed, thanks for your contribution throughout 2013. We look forward to more of that next year.
Good, David. We should probably also show that it's Christine, one of your star producers, last day, and she's a champion.
Absolutely. Christina Zaric, her last day producing for us. Thank you very much. After the break, we'll be looking ahead for the next hour of PM Agenda. Stay with us.